Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.
Talking with Dubbo Regional Council Mayor Matthew Dickerson. How are you today?
Yeah, good, thanks, Rod. Good to be chatting to you about things happening in Dubbo.
Well, what's happening in Dubbo? Any issues with flooding?
There has been a little bit of water come down, and it seems like almost a standard discussion we're having these days, Rod, about the latest water event. This one we were worried was going to get very high because the Bell River came up very quickly. You could almost see it rising, and the Bell feeds into the Macquarie down at Wellington. So we thought there'd be some more water coming down, but it seems like every flood is just that little bit different. So we didn't get quite to the levels of water we thought we would. When the river gets to about 7.4 metres, that's when our second river crossing on the Newell Highway, the Sarusia Bridge, that's when that starts to get to the point of either closing completely or closing a couple of lanes. It got around that 7.4. We did expect it to get to 7.9, but luckily it didn't get quite that high. We ended up closing 2 lanes just with some of the water that was coming over that bridge, but we only had 2 lanes, so we didn't close it down completely. In October, we had to close the bridge completely twice, but it was good that we only had to close those 2 lanes on this particular occasion. So that meant that at least the traffic could still flow reasonably well around Dubbo. We had to close off Bligh Street, which was behind the CBD, so some of the shops were affected there, and just the traffic volume that shops reported to me that they didn't have many people coming into shop. People stayed away from the CBD, which was bad for the shop owners, but good for the congestion level in the CBD. So in general, Dubbo's come through it okay. We've still got high water levels now. Still a bit of water logging around some of those river corridor fields and some of the paths, Track O'Reilly Cycleway, that type of thing. But that's almost standard for the course at the moment, Rod.
What about Wellington?
Wellington's had a bit more of a problem, and probably the biggest issue there is the Duke of Wellington Bridge. That's the low-level bridge that was built when the other bridge got knocked down many years ago, a couple of decades ago, and that low-level bridge is a good, convenient crossing for many people. The problem is that way back in 2018, Council was given a report by the Soil Conservation Service, and in that report it identified some areas of high risk along the Macquarie River for some erosion. Now, the area there that leads into the Duke of Wellington Bridge, the road that leads down to that particular bridge, was identified in that report as a high-risk area, and it talked about in that report that possibly within 10 years, that area would be eroded to the point where you wouldn't actually be able to drive down onto that bridge. So it was identified as to what needed to occur. Some treatment could have occurred to protect that particular part of the river, and some costings were put in that particular report. Unfortunately, the last council chose to do absolutely nothing about that. Now, when we've had these high water flows, it didn't take 10 years for the issue to occur. It's only taken 4 years from when that report was put out, and that has all eroded now, so you can't actually drive down to that Duke of Wellington Bridge. Prevention's always better than cure, Rod. So now, the treatment there in terms of what we'll have to do with that is interesting. We've got to get some engineering reports about the bridge for a start, then look at what we might need to do to fix the approaches there, or whether moving the bridge is better. A whole range of scenarios, a whole range of questions. I don't have answers to those at the moment, but that's certainly the major issue that's come out of this particular flood event in Wellington.
Matthew Dickerson, I thank you for your time.
My pleasure, Rod.
Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.